Behind the Beautiful Forevers, Chapter 4, Manju. The plot of this novel, Mrs. Dalloway, made no sense whatsoever to Manju. During her college reading, Asha's daughter felt so sluggish that she feared she'd caught dengue fever or malaria again, hazards of living 30 feet from a buzzing sewage lake. No, she decided it was simply the weather. Only spring, and already the sun was scorching, a knifing white force that made the eyes ache and sent Anawati water buffalo prematurely into heat. Manju thought her mother looked wan, too, but this was possibly because Corporator Subhash Sawant, the man Asha hoped would make her slum boss, had been accused in court of electoral fraud. When Manju first asked about the rumor, Asha had shrugged it off. Her patron had previously made 2 murder charges disappear. Court cases can be managed in Mumbai, as the corporator put it. So here we're setting up, or we're continuing that idea of the corruption that exists in Mumbai and certainly in the slum. We hear about how court cases can be managed in Mumbai, meaning, you talk to the right people, you pay off a few people, then they're going to go away. We also see that Asha is just shrugging off this corruption. So because we know that Asha is an ambitious woman, this behavior, kind of shrugging off the news of how it can be managed, is certainly a comment on her character. We also are set up with this conflict between Manju and Asha. And then Asha is okay with the corruption, but as we know from the previous chapter, Manju is not okay. So why did his bulk seem to be slipping from his chest to his belly? The clamminess around his collar seemed imperfectly correlated to the weather. Just as the Indian government allowed only women to stand for certain elections, it reserved other elections strictly for low-caste candidates to increase the presence of historically excluded populations in the country's political leadership. In the previous year's elections, restricted in Ward 76 to low-caste candidates, the corporator had won handily. Subhash Sawant wasn't low-caste, though. He'd simply manufactured a new caste certificate, a new birthplace, and a new set of ancestors to qualify for the ballot. At least 10 candidates in other city wards, mostly Shiv Sena, had done the same. So again, this note to corruption. The government is trying to balance out the government, providing opportunities for low-caste candidates where normally they wouldn't have them. But then we see those who are not low-caste faking their own certificates of caste just so they can run. And note that it's also for Shiv Sena. Of course, we know that Asha supports Shiv Sena, so she would support this corruption as well. But the Congress Party candidate for Ward 76, a genuine low caste who had finished second, was now papering the High Court with evidence of Subhash Sawant's falsifications, asking the judge to overturn this election. Suddenly, the corporator felt the need for citizen homage. He'd been running this ward for more than a decade, could barely recall the auto rickshaw driving and petty thuggery that came before. So he'd begun visiting the ward slums to receive the love of his constituents in hopes that it might somehow trump a paperwork discrepancy. We, of course, know that politicians everywhere do this kind of lobbying to get support. Anawati's turn next. Asha and Manju would assemble the slum dwellers in a pink temple by the sewage lake in order to pray with him for a victory in court. Asha winced when he gave the order. It was a season of school exams, and parents were reluctant to leave their huts and risk having their children abandon their textbooks. She had to bring all her influence to bear to ensure a respectable attendance. Again, a comment on Asha's personality and her ambition is that she's willing to sacrifice these children's education and their time to study for her ambitious wants. At sunset, on the designated night, Subhash Sawant strode into Anawati in an impeccable white safari suit, accompanied by an entourage. Sunil, actually, let me just stop there. Maybe a little ironic, a little almost symbolic, that Subhash is wearing a white safari suit. White, of course, often symbolizing, goodness and honesty and truth. And he's wearing this into the slums. So, and I don't know, I'm kind of thinking this out loud. Is it white because it's symbolic of what he does represent to the Anawatians? Does he represent goodness and truth? Are we trying to see the juxtaposition of who he is, that he's not what he seems? So when I'm looking and I'm reading this and I'm thinking about symbolism, I need to play with the idea. I don't know the answer yet, but I do want to play with, I know white symbolizes good and truth. So why is he wearing white? Why is the author kind of put him like that? So a thought to consider. The corporator had one of those spread-legged policeman's strides, as if his thighs were too muscled for normal walking, and there was enough oil in his hair to fry garlic. The corporator approved of the poor bhaji that Manju and her friend Meena were cooking for the ceremony. He was pleased, too, with the decorations in the tiny temple, which was furnished with an old metal school desk. The Tamil construction workers who'd settled on Awadi, Meena's parents among them, had erected this hut and consecrated it to Mariamma, the goddess who protects against plagues. With Subhash Sawant's approval, Asha had helped wrest control of it for the Maharashtrians, after which the Pink Temple sat locked most days. But this afternoon, Meena and Manju had given it a proper scrubbing. The dead flies and rat turds were gone, the new idols shining. Call people and I'll come after dinner to speak, the corporator told Asha before he and his entourage departed in their SUVs. Asha rang the temple bell at 8 p.m., and soon the place was packed. As a tabla played drummed quietly, Asha arranged herself by the school desk, the gold border of her best sari catching the light of a dozen votive candles. Almost every person in the temple, Asha included, was genuinely low caste. Most were the migrants Shiv Sena wanted to banish from Mumbai. But the residents had come not just out of fear angering Asha, but out of belief in the corporator himself. They understood Subhash Sawant to be corrupt. They assumed he'd fake his caste certificate. But he alone comes here, shows his face, Anawadians said. Before each election, he used city money or tapped the largesse of prominent American Christian charity World Vision, to give Anawadi an amenity, a public toilet, a flagpole, gutters, a concrete platform by the sewage lake where he usually stood when he came. And each time he visited, he told residents how hard he'd been fighting to hold off the bulldozers of the airport authority, which had raised huts here in 2001 and 2004. In the scheme of the airport modernization project and of the governments of Mumbai, the corporator was a bit player, a pothole filler of a politician. But he loomed larger than the Indian Prime Minister in the political imaginations of Anawadians. He needed their votes. They needed to believe in his power to protect them. So actually, here, I'm going to bring that back to what I was saying about his white suit and what it symbolizes. They do see him as somewhat of a savior, that yes, they know he's corrupt, yes, they know that he lied, but he is giving them things, and they do believe that he will protect them and their homes from being demolished. So he does represent this, I'll say, I guess the word is savior, that they need him to believe that there's hope and that they'll be okay. When does he come? People asked. Soon, Asha promised. The packed temple grew ripe with sweat. Slum-dwelling temples included, sucked in the heat of the city and held it, but in the first hour the misery went unexpressed. The next hour the temple was teeming with sighs. Time was precious to Anawadians, even those not tense about their children's exams. They had worked at dawns, homes to clean, children to bathe, and above all, water to get from the slums' trickle taps before they went dry, which involved standing in line for hours. The municipality sent water through 6 Anawadi faucets for 90 minutes in the morning and 90 minutes at night. Shiv Sena men had appropriated the taps, charging usage fees to their neighbors. These water brokers were resented, but not as much as the renegade World Vision social worker who had collected money from Anawadians for a new tap, then run away with it. So again, we see the Shiv Sena government men who are corrupt. We see the social worker for World Vision. They are corrupt. And so these slum people and Anawadians are desperate to find someone who will give them anything, and why they would be so eager to support Subhash. At 10 p.m., Asha's sari blouse was soaked at the throat and armpits, but she finally reached Subhash Sawant's chauffeur on the phone. "He's on his way," she told the crowd, then struck up a group prayer so that when Corporator arrived, he would find the residents hard at their devotions. At 11 p.m., he still hadn't come. Asha gestured to her daughter. "Get the food." The dishes Manju had prepared were to be consumed after the ceremony, but people were starting to leave, and neither the corporator nor the chauffeur was answering the phone. The would-be celebrants ate and went home, leaving only a dozen people, mostly sad sack drunks, in the temple. Asha could not compose her face. The departees would say that Asha had promised to deliver the corporator and failed. Worse, Subhash Sawant, a late-night type, would arrive to find an empty temple. It was a catastrophe for which she alone would be blamed. He would give her that smile that could not be read, but as an insult. He would say that she didn't have the respect of the residents, that Anawadi wasn't ready for a female slumlord. No doubt he would mention how many people had gathered for how successful an evening at how many other slums. As Asha bitterly laid out these probabilities to her daughter, a beautiful young eunuch wandered into Anawadi. Seeing a drummer sitting idly in an empty temple glowing with light, he went inside and started to dance. For those of you who don't know what a eunuch is, it is a male who has had their male parts, either they are born without them or they have been removed. And so they're sort of outliers in the society. Seeing a drummer sitting idly in an empty temple glowing with light, he went inside and started to dance. The eunuch had long, thick curls, lashes that touched his eyebrows, cheap metal bangles on his wrists and hips that swiveled slowly at first. He held his arms out statue still while his legs became slithery things. The drummer came to life. Manju's mouth fell open. It was as if the eunuch's upper and lower body were being operated by separate controls. He paused to take a votive candle in his teeth, then launched into a spin that extinguished the flame. The eunuchs, or hijras, of Mumbai were feared and fetishized both. They had so much bad luck, being sexually ambiguous, that the bad luck was understood to be contagious. When eunuchs came to your doorstep, you had to pay them to go away. You paid a little more if you wanted them to throw a coconut in front of your enemy. But once the coconut was thrown, the evil eye would stick, even if your enemy hired a baba to burn 3 incense sticks in a glass of rice with a sprinkle of vermilion powder on top. I do want to note here that in this society, and often in developing communities or countries, there is a big emphasis on sort of traditions and these kind of rituals and belief systems that seem very odd to us, and they don't seem to make sense, but they put a lot of value in it. And it becomes a part of how people, if we're thinking of icebergs, how people are shaped by their history and traditions and rituals that give them some sort of peace of mind that may not exist. 6 eunuchs lived in Anawadi and wore hardship on their makeup-smeared faces. Some of them had come into the temple behind the young one. But this young eunuch, a stranger, was unblemished, his femaleness not a matter of dress and lip paint, but of something in his face beyond naming. He did not want money to go away. He was now spinning so fast his locks were perpendicular to the ground, his sweat splattering the faces of the slum dwellers who had come back inside the temple ensorcelled. So I'm looking at that word ensorcelled. I actually don't know what that word means. I'm going to think about my context clues, look at the words that come before it, look at the words that come after it. So this eunuch, he's spinning so fast, his sweat splattering the faces of the slum dwellers. So he's all like, because he's spinning so fast, his face, his body is sweating, is hitting. And who had come back inside the temple because they had left because Subhash had not shown up. And then they're ensorcelled, and I'm looking at sorcerer. Are they bewitched by him? I'm actually, so what I want to do, I'm just going to do a quick check here. Let's type it in, ensorcelled. And there, I'm just going to look right here. To enchant or fascinated. So I looked at that were kind of sorcerers, and that kind of gave me that bewitched, but they're fascinated by what they're seeing. Dropping down on all fours, he bucked, butt high in the air, then sang a clear, high note that reverberated with his jerking. His name was Suraj, and he was 18 years old. Asha's son, Rahul, guessed at once what others did not. Under his tight jeans, Suraj was intact. He had simply felt, for as long as he could remember, and to the heartbreak of his mother and sisters, that he was 3 parts girl, 1 part boy. Now he lived on the tips he earned going slum to slum, dancing so hard it gave him intestinal inflictions. Like Asha, he was trying to make his name in Ward 76. So very interesting that he's not a eunuch. He hasn't had his man parts removed. He still has them, but he wants to live as a girl. And for him, he can't be, it's not even saying that he's gay. It sounds like he's probably transgender and he wants to live like a girl, but he has to make a living. So like Asha and her ambition, he has ambitions, and he's going to play this game to the best that he can. 2 women pushed forward to spin with the eunuch, becoming sinuous red and green blurs. Then the eunuch collapsed on the floor. People gasped, suspecting a seizure, until he announced that a goddess inside him had something to say. Yalama says, bring her a neem leaf, and she will answer your questions of the future. Asha frowned. What if Subhash Sawant arrived to witness this performance? She decided it was better than his finding an empty temple. People were still arriving, jumping up to try to catch a glimpse of the eunuch over all the other heads. The road boys came out, as did the brothel keeper and his customers. The sons of the zebra-tending robbers set 2 tires on fire in the Maidan, compounding the excitement, while inside the temple questions were put to the goddess lodged in the eunuch's soul. What a great line. Questions put to the goddess lodged in the eunuch's soul. I love that line. Should I take a loan to fix my house? Should I pay this man who says he can get me a job? How will I afford my daughter's wedding? What will my son become? There were several questions about whether children would pass their exams, 1 question about a heart valve, of course we probably know who that's from, and many questions about the airport authority. When are these people going to break our house? The goddess might know even more than the corporator Subhash Sawant. Very interesting here. It was very easy for them to put away the missing Subhash Sawant who never showed up and then find someone else that they can believe in. So it says a lot about the people and what they're really looking for. They just want someone to give them answers. It mattered little that the eunuch's response were gibberish or some goddess tongue that no one understood. The voice, whether the goddesses or the eunuchs, was hypnotic and felt like a blessing in itself. People were now screaming their questions. Inside the Hussein house, across the Maidan, screaming could also be heard. What is this? When will they shut up? Abdul's brother Murchi cried, placing his forehead on his math book. How could he study for his 9th grade exams? His father paced back and forth, cursing the corporator, and the Hindus of Hanawadi. These work-shirking idolaters inflict their noise on us 100 holidays a year. And now, not even a holiday, they've lost their heads over this dancing freak. The most advanced student in Anawadi, a 21-year-old named Prakash, lived 4 doors down from the temple. He sat at home with economics books in his lap and his head in his hands. 2 teardrops rolled between his fingers. His all-important final exams before college graduation, sabotaged by a spinning eunuch. He would flee to Bangalore, a city he considered more respectful of scholars, the first chance he got. At 1 a.m., the corporator answered his phone. He wasn't coming, was tied up with more important people. But he was pleased with Asha, for he assumed the glorious din he heard over the phone was all of Anawadi rallying in his honor. Irony, of course, there, that that's not what was really going on, but that's how he took it. Asha's lucky streak was continuing. Inside now, she said to Manju. Coming, Manju said vacantly, her eyes still fixed on the sweat-wet eunuch. But mother, never have I seen such a thing in my life. Anawadians agree that Manju was nicer than she had to be, given her looks, her mother's political connections, and her punishing schedule. Mornings she went to college, afternoons in the family hut she ran the slums-only school. In the other hours, she provided cooking, cleaning, water collection, and laundry services to her household of 5. These obligations were fulfilled by sleeping only 4 hours a night and rarely impinged on her temperament. But this spring, her composure was being tested by a series of mysterious infections and fevers. So right here, we have a very clear glimpse of who Manju is as a person. We see her from someone else's point of view. The Anawadians think that Manju is way nicer than she had to be. Of course, there's an idea that if you're beautiful and you're connected, like her mom's sort of like a celebrity, that she doesn't have to be nice. She can be kind of mean, but she isn't. For Manju, it's very important that she keeps being nice to people, that she has compassion for people, and that she's committed, she's resilient, that she's pushing through, and even though she has to cook and clean and collect water and do laundry, she's still getting her lessons done and taking care of her family. So quite a stand-up character. And this, of course, will put her in conflict again in juxtaposition to Asha, her mom. Asha worried that her daughter's body ran hot, which increased the risk that she'd lose her virtue. Losing her virtue, of course, meaning her virginity. Manju was hardly in danger. She had spent her teenage years turning herself into a model of proper and gentle deportment. Deportment she thought her own mother lacked. So here, even she admits that she's going to be on purpose. She's purposely going to be different than her mother. One afternoon, her brother Rahul stood at a small mirror tacked on the wall of their hut. As he massaged his face with Manju's Fair and Lovely Skin Lightening Lotion, he considered her through the brown freckled glass. She was kneeling on the floor, glossy braid flung over her shoulder, murmuring English words with an escalating desperation. "What a face you're making," Rahul said. Manju looked up. "Rahul, not so much cream." The Fair and Lovely lotion was crucial to maintaining her light complexion, and thereby her status in the marriage market. But Rahul and their younger brother, Ganesh, applied it more liberally than she did. Rahul turned on the TV with a cartoon mouse. Jerry, disguised in shoe polish, was convincing Tom that he'd swallowed enough explosives to blow up a city. Manju watched for a minute, then sighed again. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "My students will come in an hour, and I'm behind on my own work. My computer teacher said, ask your mother what she wants you to do, your Photoshop assignment or your housework, else he will fail me. And did I tell you what happened yesterday in psychology class? I left my purse under the desk to go to the toilet, and someone took my money. What sort of people? And the other girls have more money than I do. But why do I bother telling you? Your eyes are inside the TV, not even listening." "I am listening," Rahul protested. "You're just sitting on so many tensions, I don't know which one to think about." Rahul had his own tensions, balancing ninth grade exams and late-night hotel temp work. By now, he could expertly mimic the way the intercontinental waiters fixed their faces when they got near a guest. They had to be both upward tilt, saying, "I'm alert and obliging," and a chin down servile thing, "I am invisible to you, sir, if you prefer that." His own face was open, with amusement-seeking eyes. Anawadi girls came around to it quickly. But he thought that a better managed face might have spared him the humiliation he had suffered at a recent hotel party. The trouble had begun with a DJ who, after midnight, seemed to be reading his telepathic requests, a Christina Aguilera belter. "I am beautiful no matter what they say," segued into Rise Up, a dance song that was Rahul's current favorite. "Rise up, don't be falling down again. Rise up, long time I broke the chains." The lyrics in English were meaningless to him, the bass line irresistible. Every time he heard it, he vibrated inside when the first echoing chords came through the hotel speakers. He might have smiled or tapped a foot. Suddenly, 2 young hotel guests were tugging his arm, asking him to demonstrate some Mumbai moves. Sozzled white people, sozzled meaning drunk, were known to be generous tippers. He began discreetly, he thought, to demonstrate a few steps. No shoulders and hands, just head and feet. "Have you gone mad, asshole?" A hotel superior grabbed him. Other members came running from across the room. It was as if he'd stabbed a Bollywood star with a fork. The permanent waiter sniggered as he was dragged on his heels into the trash room. Only later, Recovering at home, did he find the line of argument he might have used to defend himself? If the first law of hotel work was not to share the guests, wasn't the second law to give them whatever they asked for? As Cartoon Tom blew a house to smithereens, Rahul turned back to the mirror and Manju began her reading for her major English literature. Today's assignment was 18th century restoration drama in Cogreaves, The Way of the World. Manju hadn't read The Way of the World, nor did her professors expect her to. Except in the best colleges dominated by high-caste, affluent students, Indian liberal arts education was taught by rote. At her mediocre all-girls college founded by the Lions Club, she was simply required to memorize a summary the teacher provided for each literary work on the syllabus, then restate it on the test, and later on state board exams. Manju had a gift for memorization. She called it my by-hearting, but she found the characters in The Way of the World hard to keep straight. My by-hearting is like memorizing by heart, so it's her by-hearting. Millamant, Mirabelle, Petulant, have you ever heard such names? And there are so many more, she told Rahul after a while. Everyone is telling lies and tricking people to get money. But where my teacher wrote what the story means, I don't understand. Love is subordinated was the trouble spot. Although she had never held the hand of a boy her own age, love was an English word about which she felt confident. Subordinated, though, evoked only irritation at her mother, who hadn't kept her promise to buy Manju an English-Marathi dictionary. Neither Rahul nor her mother knew English, and both took umbrage that the language of India's former colonizers was considered requisite for decent jobs in offices and hotels, but Marathi was just as venerable a language. To Manju, the new importance of English was a byproduct of something she generally welcomed, a more globalized, meritocratic India. It didn't much matter whether a person learned the language by studying Congreve or by practicing Chase Manhattan Visa card dialogue at Personalities Spoken English, or one of the training courses for international call center work. Competence in English, a credential bespeaking worldliness and superior education, was a potential springboard out of the slums. Her own English was still slow and wooden, though good enough to be the second best in Anawadi. So here we have, if we're looking at sort of patterns of behavior, we have the remnants left from the colonization, and that they know that to be in the top when the British were at the top is to speak English and to be part of the globalized world. For Manju to get out of poverty, or anyone to get out of poverty, they need to be able to speak English. So regardless of whether, I think the point the author is making, studying Congreve, that's a leftover from a British education system that, you're not going to learn Tums from. But she's like, I don't care. I just need to learn English. The best English was spoken by Prakash, the economic student who lived near the temple. In the intricate social hierarchy of Anawadi's young people, something now based less on caste than on future economic prospects, Prakash was the guy at the top. He had been middle class, studying in a good private school before his father got hit by a train. So we see that he went from the top to the bottom very quickly. In his spare time, he sold mutual funds for ICICI Bank, making cold calls for a paltry commission. Manju figured that Prakash would know the meaning of the word subordinated, but she had never spoken to him. A young woman in the slum had to weigh the value of each potential interaction with a male against the rumors it would inspire. Already people were gossiping about a cricket player who had secured her photo and laminated it in the shape of a heart. So as she went outside to scrub the laundry, she didn't even glance at the fellow college student who was reading outside his hut. We see that Manju is not going to go against these traditions. Even though she's going to be like the first female to go to college out of Anawadi and that lots of people are correct, she will follow those traditional rules. And that says a lot about her personality. And if you're thinking about her iceberg, where we want to be thinking, why does she have this strong sense of values that determines her behavior? Mirabelle, Beau, Millamant, Gallant, Mr. Final, Cuckold. She murmured bits of plot summary as she applied the stone to her mother's large panties, her father's small shirt. No, Mirabelle is the Gallant. She took the wrung-out clothes inside and hung them on a string against the wall. Part of the wall stopped 2 feet from the roof, and her father had been promising to close the gap for ages. But that was as likely as her mother arriving home with an English Marathi dictionary. As she cleaned the two-burner stove, she repeated, "Themes are love affairs, social position, and money." Roaches, 100 of them scattered. Stepping over Rahul, now asleep on the floor, she took some food scraps outside and dumped them in the sewage lake, which the hot season had magicked into a thick mat of water hyacinth weed. Again, a juxtaposition. She's talking about themes from British literature as there's roaches running around and she's dumping things in the sewers. So kind of a very interesting imagery there of what she's trying to learn versus what her real life is like. Mirabelle seeks social advantage through marriage to the beauty, Millamant. When Manju by-hearted, she often pictured herself in the role of the heroine. But this girl, Millamant, left her cold, whining when she was rich and independent enough to be negotiating her own marriage. Manju wanted to be a teacher when she finished college, and her great fear was that, in a fit of pique, her mother would wed her to a village boy who didn't think that a woman should work. Then she died doing the thing she was doing now, sweeping the dirt that had blown in from the outside, mopping, then sweeping the new dirt that had blown in while she mopped. So while Manju is traditional and she will follow the rules for women, she certainly doesn't want to marry a traditional man. In Congreve's drama, money is more important than love. This was her mother's position, obviously. Manju's younger brother Ganesh was at the front of the house, manning a small grocery that represented Asha's latest entrepreneurial scheme, a failing one. To start the store, she had secured for herself one of the government loans that Mr. Campbell hoped would finance his heart valve. So again, she's putting money over the health, of course, of Mr. Campbell, who won't get that money. Asha had intended for her husband to run the store, but she'd been using the proceeds to get drunk while he worked. He was currently passed out at Ganesh's feet. Manju wasn't too interested in money. She hungered for virtue, a desire that was partly a fear. When studying, she sometimes fingered the scar on her neck from a night years ago when she'd stolen money from her mother to buy chocolates. Asha had responded with an axe, but Manju's desire to be good was also rebellion, a way of chastising a mother who was said to acquire the television set and other advantages by behaving badly. Manju's instrument for demonstrating her decency was the school she ran out of her hut every afternoon. The school was financed by central government money, funneled through a Catholic charity, and Asha was a teacher, officially. But her mother was busy with Shiv Sena, so Manju had been running the class since she was in 7th grade, displaying a commitment her mother found annoying. So interesting, this line, displaying a commitment her mother found annoying. You know, her mom can't understand why Manju is so good when Asha is not quite so good. Although Asha was pleased with the small stipend the school brought to the household, she thought that Manju should conduct the class only on days when the supervisor came to check, the way a lot of other hut school teachers did. So Asha is trying to get Manju to be like her, but Manju has the strength not to. The central government called schools like Manju's bridge schools. Her brief was to provide 2 hours of daily lessons to child laborers or girls kept home by household responsibilities in order to get them acclimated to and excited about formal education. Sparking enthusiasm wasn't hard. As every slum dweller knew, there were 3 main ways out of poverty: finding an entrepreneurial niche, as Zusu Sains had found in garbage, politics and corruption, in which Asha placed her hopes, and education. We know that Manju is placing hers in education. Several dozen parents in the slum were getting by on roti and salt in order to pay private school tuition. So there are many families who are putting their money on education to get them out of poverty. In the last 5 years, more than 100 schools had opened around the airport. Some excellent and expensive, some fraudulent. Some, like Manju's, taught by unqualified teenagers. But all were understood to be better than the free schools like Merrill Municipal, where Asha was a contract teacher. Nearly 60% of the state's public school teachers hadn't finished college, and many of the permanent teachers had paid large, under-the-table sums to school officials to secure their positions. So note While education is the way out of poverty, 60% of the state's public school teachers hadn't finished college. So real education, the kind that kids really need to pull themselves out of poverty, is really not existing, certainly not to the Anawadians. The corporator was among the politicians who preferred to capitalize on these abysmal schools instead of reforming them. He'd opened his own private school using a front man. At Merrill, we play, take recess, play again, then have lunch, was how the Nepali boy, Adarsh, described the municipal school curriculum. The free lunches were the big draw. Adarsh came to Manju's school after his regular school day, since she was always teaching something, often the plot summaries she was trying to memorize for college. Her students didn't understand the plot of Miss Dalloway any better than Manju did, but they say that Othello was